Hi everybody, welcome to part 3 of the Firework Maker's Daughter. I'll just recap a little bit, hope you've got a blanket for snuggliness. The Jungle Grill was certainly doing good business, or would have been if Rambashi had been charging for it. "I hope he knows what he's doing, Hamlet," Chulak said as the elephant browsed quietly on the banyan tree that overspread the terrace. "He reckons it'll be such good publicity that they'll come back when he starts charging. I'm not so sure. Still, the food's good, smoky but tasty." Rambashi's cook was having trouble with the grill, which he kept having to throw water over when it got too hot. Clouds of smoke and steam kept billowing out, and the waiters rushed to and fro with full plates and dirty plates and flasks of wine and menus and coconuts full of ice cream. Meanwhile, the village elders were preparing the lakeshore for the full moon ceremony. Chulak and Hamlet, full of supper, wandered along to have a look. The sand was swept and smoothed, lanterns were hung in the trees, and blossoms full of all colours were scattered on the water. The path from the temple to the lake was crowded several deep on either side, and Chulak had to climb on Hamlet's back in order to see. Then the ceremony began. A great drum sounded 3 times, and an orchestra began to play, gongs and xylophones and drums and cymbals and flutes. A line of dancers came out of the temple and swayed down the path towards the lake, their fingernails snapping and flicking like fireflies, and their golden skirts shimmering in the lantern light. The head man of the village struck a light and lit a scented candle in a paper boat, which he floated out onto the lake. The incense made the air sweet and rich. Very soon other paper boats were floating out to join it. And then a little child pointed at the treetops on the far side of the dark lake and said, "Moon!" The full moon was rising, and as it rose, the music rose too, the gongs and xylophones and cymbals all summoning the goddess from the lake. And then she was there. Though no one had seen her arrive, it was as if she'd come when they were looking away, and when they looked back they saw her, though no one had really looked away. She was floating to the shore on a raft of water lilies, a beautiful lady in a robe the colour of the moon, with silver rings and amulets and a necklace of jasmine flowers. One after another the villagers bowed to her and asked for her help. This woman for a sick child, that man for a good harvest, these lovers for a blessing on their marriage. The goddess rebuked some for asking too much, although she never refused anyone in need. When they had all finished, and the goddess was about to depart, Chulak gathered his wits and shook his head, because he was a little dazzled by her beauty, and he thrust his way to the water's edge and knelt down. "Goddess," he said, "please hear me too." But before the goddess could answer, Hans took him roughly and hauled him away. "What are you doing, stranger? Away with him, defiling the lake. Who is he? Who gave him permission? Stone him, turn him out." Chulak struggled. He could see Hamlet raising his trunk and shifting his feet, and he knew the elephant was getting angry. "No," he cried. "Listen, I've got a special request. Just let me please just ask the goddess." The high priest looked down, frowning. His face was shadowed and stern. "How dare you come to this sacred place?" he said. "The goddess of the lake is not to be disturbed by your frivolous requests. Take him away. No, she shall not hear you. Be thankful let you go with your life. Take him to the village boundary, and if he comes back, kill him." Over the noise and shouts and the struggle, there came a sound like a mighty trumpet, and everyone fell still in fear. Chulak was frightened as well, for he knew what it was. For when Hamlet trumpeted, it meant he had nearly lost his temper. But before anybody could move, the goddess spoke herself. Her voice was soft and low, like the murmur of waves on a beach at night. "What is the cause of all this commotion? Stop fighting at once. It is good of you to protect me from embarrassment, High Priest, but I should like to hear from this young man, and to see his friend the elephant. Come down to the water, both of you." Chulak looked at Hamlet and saw that the great beast was embarrassed as well. Hamlet stepped through the crowd, being very careful not to tread on any toes, and knelt down next to Chulak on the sand. The slogans dawned on him were very clear in the moonlight. The goddess read them and asked Hamlet to turn around and show his other side. "Eat at Rambashi's Jungle Grill. Chang loves lotus blossom. thought I'd wash that one off," Shulak said. "I think it's charming," said the goddess, "but you mustn't do it any more. Your friend is too wise and noble to be written on, and if he could speak, I'm sure you'd realise that yourself." And she looked at Shulak in such a way that he knew exactly what she meant and felt ashamed. "However," she went on, "I can see that your request is not a frivolous one. Tell me what you seek." We've got a friend," Shulak said eagerly. "She wants to be a firework maker, you see, and, well, she's done all the apprenticeship, but she wants to get some royal sulphur from Rasvani, the fire fiend, so as to qualify properly. So she's gone off herself to Mount Merapi, only she didn't know about getting a flask of magic water for protection, and we don't want her to get hurt, so we've come to ask, please, as a great favour, could you please give us some? And then we'll chase after her and see if we can catch her up." The goddess nodded. "Your friend has good friends," she said. "But Mount Merapi is far away and the journey is dangerous. You had better set off at once and take great care." And as if she had known what they had wanted all the time, she held out a little gourd fastened with a silver clasp. Shulak took it and bowed again, and the orchestra began to play and the dancers to dance, and when people looked at the lake again, the goddess was gone, though no one had seen her vanish. Before they left, Shulak washed Hamlet clean in the lake. Some of the village children helped, but they didn't help for long, because soon there was something else for them to see, a great cloud of smoke and flames coming from the jungle grill. Oh dear, said Shulak. "There goes Uncle Rambashi's latest plan, Hamlet. I could tell that cook was having trouble. I hope he's all right." "They're all safe," said Hamlet, "and the children are enjoying the fire." Squeals of delight and excitement were coming from the crowd as the roof fell in with a shower of sparks. Buckets of water were being passed from the lake, and Shulak could hear Rambashi saying, "What a spectacle! What a splendid night! You know, my boys, that gives me my best idea yet. All we have to do is—" "We haven't even had our meal!" cried one of the waiters. "Time to go, Hamlet," said Shulak, and they set off along the lakeshore towards the mountains in the distance. By this time, Lila had come to the end of the jungle. Climbing all the time, she moved on and on as the trees thinned out and the path became a mere track, and then vanished altogether. All the jungle sounds, the clicking and buzzing of the insects, the cries of the birds and monkeys, the drip of water off the leaves, the croaking of the little frogs were behind her now. When she had heard them, she had enjoyed their company, but now there was nothing except the sound of her foot on the path and the occasional rumble from the mountain, which was so deep that she felt it through her feet as much as she heard it through her ears. When night fell, she lay down on the stony ground beside a rock and wrapped herself in her one blanket. The full moon shone right in her face and kept her awake, and she couldn't get comfortable because of the stones on the ground. Finally, she sat up in annoyance. But there was no one to share her annoyance with, and she had never felt so lonely. "I wonder," she began to say, but shook her head. She hadn't come on this journey in order to wonder how things were at home. It was the way things were at home that had made her come on the journey after all. "Well, if I can't sleep, I might as well keep walking," she said to herself. She folded her blanket away and retied her sarong and tightened her sandals and set off again. The ground became steeper and steeper. Soon she could no longer see the top of Mount Merapi, so she knew she must be climbing the side of it. There were no plants at all here, not even shrubs or grass, just bare rock and loose stones, and the ground was warm. "I'm close," she said to herself. "It can't be far now." But as she said that, she set her foot on a stone, and it rolled under her weight, and she fell, and a dozen other rocks rolled down with her. All the breath was knocked out of her, and she had none left to cry out with as the rocks pummeled and battered her. The rocks bounded on down the mountain until finally they came to rest a long way below. Lila sat up gingerly. "Ugh," she said, "that was silly. I wasn't looking where I was putting my feet. I must be more careful." She got up and found that one of her sandals had come off and tumbled down the mountain with the stones. It was nowhere to be seen. Very delicately she put her naked foot down and found the ground hot beneath it. Well, there was nothing she could do about that, and hadn't she come seeking fire, and hadn't she burned herself time and time again as an apprentice? And what did she need delicate feet for anyway? On and on she climbed, higher and higher, Before long she came to a part of the slope where all of the stones were loose, and where she slid back 2 steps for every 3 she took upwards. Her feet and legs were bruised and battered, and then she lost her other sandal, and she nearly cried out in despair, because there was no sign of the grotto, just an endless slope of hot, rough stones that tumbled and rolled underfoot. And her throat was parched and her lungs were panting in the hot, thin air, and she fell to her knees and clung with trembling fingers as the stones began to roll under her again. She let go her little bag of food and her blanket. They didn't matter any more. The only thing that mattered was climbing on. She dragged herself on bleeding knees up and up until every muscle hurt, until she had no breath left in her lungs, until she thought she was going to die, and still she went on. Then one stone, bigger than the rest, began to shift above her as the little stones beneath it tumbled down. It slid and rolled towards her, and she had no strength to move, but at the last second it bounded over her and rolled on down the mountainside in a cloud of dust and pebbles. Where it had been, there was a great hole as tall as a house. The moonlight shone into it a little way, but the hole went deeper still, right into the heart of the mountain. A gust of sulphur-laden smoke came billowing out, and Lila knew she had found her goal. It was the grotto of the fire fiend. And that seems like a good and slightly annoying place to stop until tomorrow. See you then. Bye.